The title of today's presentation is The Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on the Portuguese Society. And probably already realized I'm Rita Coelho, I'm the one that was just introduced. And just to present a short summary of why this study happened, this is part of a lot of studies. I also manage the Observatory of the Portuguese Society. This is one of our tools that was launched back in 2015. And since 2015 that we have been collecting data on a regular basis. So we do our best to collect data every 4 months, well, sometimes 5 months, but at least 3 moments in time every year. And what we do is that we collect a bunch of different indicators, just to give you an idea, and this one, lucky the ones that don't read Portuguese, it's in English, just to give you an idea of some of the studies, and all these studies are available online. We run studies on happiness, consumption, saving habits, confidence in education system, trust in government and institutions. We also run some particular studies sometimes when we think it's really important. Like, for example, when we won the Eurovision Song Contest to see what is the impact on happiness and on a bunch of other economic factors. Lucky those that also like soccer, you know, we also run a study after Euro 2016 to see the impact on happiness and on confidence on society. So we run many different studies with a lot of different indicators. In the particular case of this study, it was by coincidence, it was planned to happen in March. And when we started planning the study, and since we had already entered this pandemic crisis, this huge health crisis, we thought that the best study we could do at this moment would be to collect as much as possible indicators about this health crisis. And specifically, because this is the goal of all our studies, we wanted to understand what would be the impact of the crisis on the Portuguese society. So we designed a study I will return back to this. We designed a study with many multiple indicators. We call the general indicators, the ones related with happiness, satisfaction with life, well-being, because these are indicators that we collect all the time. Every time we run a study, we have data about this, so it allows us to have an overview and to see an overview of what happened throughout time since 2015. Then we also included several indicators about income, saving habits. We also have several of them throughout time, not every time, but very often. We also collected data on economic confidence, on optimism and satisfaction about the future, since we are dealing with these challenging times, and some consumption habits. These will be the first indicator that I will show to you. Then afterwards, we entered a very specific section about COVID, because we really wanted to assess what was the overall perception that the Portuguese society or the participants that answered this study would have regarding some of the measures that had been implemented by many different entities, also how efficient they consider those measures to be. And then we had a very large section, I will not be able to show the entire section today, on work conditions. So we had participants that are already in teleworking, others that are still working physically, others that had a layoff, so they are at home without working. And we assessed a bunch of indicators, but by itself, these indicators would be one specific conference, so I will just provide an overview about this. About the sample, because I just skipped the slide a while ago. So we had 1,000 participants, 657 females and 343 males. This is very common. Usually we have more females than males answering our survey. And we had a very heterogeneous sample, both in terms of age. So we can see that we have multiple participants in terms of age, in terms of district where they live, in terms of education. We have people that are married, people that are single, people with 1 kid, with 2 kids, with 3 kids. And we have people that are in many different conditions. Sorry, I just moved. People that are in many different conditions right now in terms of working, in terms of occupation. Just to give you an idea, we usually, when we do these studies of the Observatory of the Portuguese Society, we don't aim for a high representativeness of the population, because usually we get more or less close. So we here in this slide, we are comparing with census 2011, just to give you an overview. We are the yellowish, brownish kind of strange color here. And one of the problems why sometimes we don't, well, not sometimes, most of the times we don't wait the results, it's because we collect this data through our online research panel. So we have a big research panel, online research panel, that I also coordinate at the school. We have more than 16,000 participants, but due to its nature, because it's an online panel, we don't have many participants above 55, 60 years old. So this means that we are always in lack of these participants here, and to weight the data, we would put like too much weight on a couple of participants that answered the survey. So let's start. So the first indicator that we have and that I would like to talk about, it's the one on happiness and life satisfaction. And the conclusions, you know, and I will show the graph in a couple of minutes. The graphic talks by itself. What happens is that we observed for the first time since we are collecting data in 2015, a huge decrease in many of these indicators. So we observed a huge decrease in terms of satisfaction with life. We observed a huge decrease in terms of happiness. But interestingly enough, and we'll see this throughout most of the slides, interestingly enough, sorry, I just had to move something here. Interestingly enough, we also obtained some increase in, well, not an increase, but we realized that one of these indicators not register such a big decrease as the other one. So I believe the graphic talks by itself. Basically, we have three lines. The green line, it's the level of satisfaction with daily activities, and this is the one that we don't observe such a huge decrease. By the way, we will see this in many different indicators. People in general, not all, because we will also make a segmentation depending on the type of income, financial difficulties, and so on. But in general, we tend to observe that people are not totally dissatisfied with this new life that they have been experiencing in the last, 6 or 7 weeks. So it's not so bad to be at home. And we'll also see that with the teleworking, with some of the data that we obtain. Where we obtain the biggest decrease, and I've put a couple of circles just to be sure that we would all be aligned, where we observe the biggest decreases in terms of the happiness in general, it's one single item, and the satisfaction with life in general. Okay, so this clearly shows the kind of crisis that we are living at this moment. What we did, and we do this with the majority of the indicators. When I don't show it, it's because it's not significant. So it means that it was a waste of time. But even sometimes, even when it's not significant, I will show you some of these graphics, because sometimes it allows us to get an idea, a better grasp of what is going on. What we observe here, we made a division between financial difficulty. So we have one specific question in our questionnaire. Usually we have this, which is how difficult it is to live with your monthly income, your household. So it's not the person, the household. And we use this indicator to divide the participants in 3 groups. Those participants that have serious difficulties, those participants that have moderate difficulties, and those participants that have no difficulties in living with their monthly income. And what we observe here in this graphic, and again, I think it's a graphic that talks by itself, is that indeed there is a very significant difference. And we also see it over there for all those that like statistics. On the right corner, we have we are testing for the significance of these differences. And what we observe here is that those that experience more difficulties in living with their regular income, monthly income, are the ones that also show the biggest decreases in terms of life satisfaction, happiness with daily activities, and happiness in general. But, as I told you a while ago, we also observe that those that do not have serious difficulties, they experience some positive, they experience some positive, like we can see it over here, especially with the daily activities. We did the same type of analysis, but this time we divided per age, because this can provide us sometimes some insights. Again, it provides us indeed with some insights. We just obtained a significant difference in terms of the daily activities, but just to give you an idea, in the other two, even without being statistically significantly different, we realized that the younger ones and those that are in the tier between 45 and 54 years old are the ones showing the biggest decreases. But then, you know, the place where we get the highest significance, that's in the satisfaction with daily activities. And here, the older ones are showing this, which, you know, if we think well, it might also make sense, because in principle, the older ones are the ones that may have, you know, less concerns. They don't have the kids at home, and they are using their time perhaps to things that they like, that they enjoy, for hobbies and these kind of things. Our second indicator has to do is related with well-being in general. So we have here this lady doing the Zen yoga kind of activity. And here we collected a bunch of different indicators, because we always do. That's why we have all this longitudinal. We don't do it every time, but we do it at least once per year. As you can see it here, we have it, we didn't collect in 2016. We were still calibrating what to do at that time, but then we started collecting back in 2017, then 2018, 2019, and so on. And what we observe here is that we observe the biggest decrease in two main indicators, which again, it's not a surprise. So the story makes perfectly sense. We observe a decrease in terms of safety when you are walking in the street. So people are feeling less safe. People are afraid of getting COVID. People are afraid of a bunch of different things. You know, we are getting a little bit schizophrenic regarding the virus. And people are also quite concerned with the security in terms of future, safety in their future. And this has to do with the uncertainty. And we will observe this again when we analyze the economic confidence. We'll observe a huge decrease in terms of the economic confidence. And I'm already talking a little bit too much, because we'll see that in a while. Okay. Again, not a big surprise, but it's interesting to see is that we also observe an increase. Do you see here this kind of purple pinkish line? And here the increase is with the quantity of time that people have to do the things that they really want to do. So the fact that we are at home, we were talking about that here at my place this morning, the simple fact that we no longer need to enter the car and we need to drive and we need to spend X amount of time in the car, you know, it saves us a lot of time throughout the day in principle. So we can use it to do different things than the ones we are used to. So we observe that increase and we observe the decrease. The other lines, you know, they more or less remain the same. So they are not extraordinary in terms of changes. Then again, what we did was we tried to understand to what extent these three items, because these were the items that we observed the significant differences, variations, sorry, to what extent these three items would change the behavior depending on the type of difficulty that we had in living with our income. And what we observe here is that, you know, once again, those people, the poor people that have difficulty in living with their monthly income, are the ones showing the highest variation in terms of income. And on the other extreme, the people that do not experience any kind of difficulties are the ones that show, you know, more time to do the things that they really like and to spend on activities that they like. Just to give you an idea, in our sample, we have at this moment, in this specific cohort, we had 422 people that reported to experience difficulties in living with their monthly income. We can see it here in the graphic. We had 340 people that reported moderated difficulties, and then we had 238 people that said that they could live with their monthly income. In terms of here we did a kind of a different analysis because we also have the kind of condition that people have regarding work, you know, on a regular basis, not now during the pandemic situation. And so we tried to understand if we would get significant differences. So we have people that are really the bosses, people that are kind of freelancers that work, you know, the famous recibos verdes or freelancing people, those that work to others. These are the majority of the people that we have in the sample, 676. And then we have some others that have different kind of situations. Sometimes it's difficult for us to understand. We have this option. And then we have about like 175 people that don't work because they are retired or because they are students. So the students, we put them here on this group. The only indicator that we obtained as significant was again the quantity of time that we have to do our things. And, you know, perhaps it's not also maybe not a big surprise, or maybe it is. The people that report more time are those that are working kind of freelancing, you know, most likely because also perhaps they are not getting as much business as they tend to to get on a regular basis. Our third section, it's about income and saving habits. And it's a very important section because that's the section that provides us with insights of eventually what will happen in the nearby future. So this section and the next section about economic confidence, they are both, you know, of extremely relevance for us to try to predict eventually what will happen in the near future. So here what we got is that, so here we have just the main conclusions. What we obtain in terms of saving habits, we don't observe huge differences. Well, we even observe something surprising. This might be due to the fact that people at this moment, they are currently, many of them, suffering from some kind of economic stress. And so therefore their intentions is to save more. So globally, this index indicates that the willingness to continue save or to save increased by 3.1%. So we have it over here globally when we consider the full index. So this is interesting. It means that people, perhaps it gave them an opportunity to rethink a little bit the kind of saving habits that they had in place until this specific moment. We've already seen in the previous economic crisis that we had in the previous decade, beginning of this one. The problem with this kind of intentions is that usually they have a very short-term life, so they don't last for long. You know, we have these intentions for a couple of months and eventually one semester, and then after a while we think, oh, we are already okay with income, and very often we just return back to our kind of regular behavior. Here what we have, were two items, and basically we're trying to understand in general how did people evaluate the monthly income from the household, and also their interest in saving. And basically, you know, the lines are quite stable, so we didn't observe a significant difference over here. Then we had a kind of a couple of different questions where we were really trying to compare what was happening right now and what people were expecting to happen in the future after the pandemic crisis is over, you know, hoping that it will be over sooner or later. So here on the left side, we have the graphic about savings. So to what extent, what is the percentage of income that globally, you know, at aggregate level, people save from the household before the pandemic crisis started? And then we asked the question, you know, how much do you expect to continue saving after the pandemic crisis is the ability for you to save? And, you know, they report that they are expecting to save a slightly smaller percentage compared with what they were saving right now, most likely because they may also be expecting the income to decrease a little bit. So we are not sure exactly how do people do these calculations. It depends on they decide to do it. And then we asked on a scale of 1 to 10, to what extent they thought that their current economic situation had been affected by the crisis. You know, we were expecting a slightly bigger bar over here. So I think it's good news that, you know, we are in 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, it could be worse. But then people, when we asked them if we were already in the contingency situation, we were already in the emergency plan. And we asked them, you know, if this continues for more 1 month, what do you think will be the impact? And people are expecting this impact to increase. So we observe a decrease in there, and we observe an increase here on the orange side. So I've put some arrows just to see the movement. Then we analyzed this same indicator before and after, but this time taking into consideration the different incomes. Okay. The different difficulty in living with income. And what we observe here is that we observe a decrease. We observe a decrease in all the different segments, independent if they are if they experience low difficulty or high difficulty in living with their current income. So this is a trend, clearly. You know, people are expecting to have much more difficulty. Sorry, people are expecting to save much less after the pandemic crisis. The pandemic crisis happened. We did the same type of analysis just to try to get a better grasp of what was going on, this time through age. And here, in terms of age, we obtained a significant difference in the segment between 25 and 34 years old. And again, the same segment that we were talking a while ago, the one between 45 and 55 years old. You know, we could offer a bunch of different explanations for this. It may also be with the fact that these people are more afraid of getting fired, because the ones between 35 and 44, or even the ones between 18 and 24, especially for this last one, probably it's easier for them to get a new job in case they get fired, they lose their job, than the ones between 45 and 55, because they are above that critical age, the 40, the psychological age to get a new job. And so these ones are the guys that report that most likely they will suffer a huge decrease in terms of the savings that they will be able to make. Then we analyzed the same thing, but now comparing based on economic difficulty, and what we observe is that all the groups report a significant impact in their actual situation, economic situation, in case this we will extend. And this was end of March, so we collected data between the 29th and the 30th of March. So end of March, we were about to enter the second emergency state. People were already predicting that we would have at least one more emergency state. I don't think we were at that time conscious that we could have 2 more emergency states, or eventually 3 more emergency states. But at that time, we were already anticipating some difficulties in terms of economic situation, in case it would last for more than what we were living at that specific moment. Then we included another indicator that we tried to include also as often as possible. We didn't add it in the beginning of 2015. I will see it in a while. I also don't know it by heart, but we started including this also in the majority of our studies, because it provides us an overview of to what extent people have confidence in the economy. Okay, and here, and I have a lot of things written over here, here what we observe is that, so we have 3 lines. The green line, the one on the top, it's the indicator of to what extent people are expecting economic conditions to change. And sorry, I will explain the 3 lines, and I need to go back to the previous slide, because there we have exactly the explanation how we calculate this. And then we have the blue line, and the blue line is the economic confidence index that is calculated by subtracting the other 2. I will give you the formula in a while. And then we have the red line, which is the indicator of the actual state of the economic conditions. I'm just moving backwards just to show you one thing, because the way this is a worldwide indicator that it's used by the majority of the international studies, and the way we calculate this, for example, the indicator of the actual state, we subtract the percentage of those participants that indicate to believe they will be good or excellent. We'll subtract to these ones the ones that believe will be very weak, will be weak or very weak. Okay, so we need to look at these numbers in a different way. It's always a difference between those that rate it very high and those that rate it very low. I was told to be careful with my hands, but basically, no, it's a difference between the high one and the low, and the low one. And what we have here, look, we have a decrease as we have never seen before since March 2017. We have been collecting it on a regular basis. That's when we started. What do we have next? Then we decided to analyze, just to give you an idea, it was not really to analyze between segments, but to show you to what extent did participants agree or not agree or evaluate the actual economic conditions. That's what this graphic on the top is analyzing. And what we observe, and I was making a few calculations a while ago, you know, what I did was that I summed up, sorry, I have your pictures over here, so I need to hide them a little bit. So like, for example, if we sum up these blue bars over here, the blue bars are from those that experience very high difficulty. About 63.7% of them evaluate in a very negative way the actual economic conditions. While if we sum up the green bars, at least I'm seeing that in green in my computer, if we sum up these green bars, which are the participants that do not experience economic difficulties right now in living with their monthly income just between quotes, of course, 40.3% evaluated as very weak or very weak. So this means that we observe a difference here, although the majority of the groups are clearly now skewing towards the left side, so towards, the being in the middle or to the left side. And then we asked participants to what extent did they consider that the economic conditions would improve or decrease during this next coming year, so until the end of 2020. And I'm sorry to tell you, but the predictions are not very good, at least based on the participants. The majority of the participants, as we can see it over here, I'm not sure if I've put, no, I did not. As we can see over here, on the bottom graphic, we can see that the majority of the participants are really, really, towards the left side, which means that they really believe that it will, the economic conditions will decrease. And we have very few participants on the right side of the scale, which are those that believe that they will increase. So the generality of the participants believe we will have a tough year. Then we had an indicator about optimism and satisfaction with the future, because it's important. Especially for me, I think it was clear a while ago when Professor Philippe Santos introduced me. I'm a professor of marketing, I'm from consumer behavior, and expectations mean almost everything in consumption. So if we expect things to improve, if we are optimistic about the future, most likely we will manage our actual consumption in such a way that will be aligned with our expectations. So, and here we assessed the emotional state of the participants, and then we assessed specific items in terms of optimism and in terms of satisfaction. And what we obtained, sorry, I'm terrible with speaking, so I just need to check the hours. Okay, I'm still okay. So what we observed in here, so we asked participants, thinking about your personal life and in the conditions after the pandemic crisis, what you think will be your level of satisfaction with life. So to what extent people anticipated they will be satisfied or not. And what we observe is that people, tend to indicate that their level of satisfaction will decrease. So here we have those that indicated moderately satisfaction, the ones that would be very satisfied. So we observe a decrease, and the green bar are before the pandemic, so before March. The brownish yellowish bar is during March, so we're already in the pandemic situation, and the dark blue one, it's after everything ends, although we didn't know exactly, and we still don't know exactly when it will end. We start to see just some light at the end of the tunnel. So what we'll observe is this general decrease with satisfaction with life, with the majority of the participants anticipating that they will feel less satisfied, and many participants also indicating that they will feel more dissatisfied with life. From those that had answered before March that they were in one of these situations. It's important to do like this because depending on the situation that you are, we have different perceptions to what will happen in the future. Then we did, again, with the same indicator, but this time take into consideration just a specific level of income. And we asked specifically, sorry, it was not exactly the same indicators. We asked specifically about level of satisfaction with life today and level of satisfaction with life in the future. And what we observe over here is that those that have the lowest income are the ones showing lower levels of satisfaction, both right now and both in the future. They anticipate, and all these differences are significant between each of the groups. We also assessed emotions, and in terms of emotions, we asked participants to indicate they had experienced in the last month, so we were at the end of March already, they had experienced in the last month a couple of emotions, so we asked them how worried, if they experienced some kind of being worried, anxious, tense, if they were calm, happy, relaxed. And what we identify is that the emotions that they report the most are the more negative emotions. So in general, we had a kind of a negative kind of emotional state during this March, very much related also with anxiety and being worried with the future. We've seen that already. Everything makes sense. You know, this is a kind of a story that at the end it makes sense. And then when we ask participants to what extent did they believe that the future would bring them nice things, or that if they were optimistic in terms of the future, or if they were confident that soon they will return to normality, you know, moderate levels on a scale 1 to 7. The lowest one, it's about, I'm confident that things soon will return back to normality. So people know that something happened and this will prevail in the next months, eventually, you know, we hope just months, and that things will take time to return back to what we were experiencing at the end of February, when we were still expecting that the virus would be just in Italy and Spain, or beginning of January, that it was just in China, in a different continent, so it would never affect us. So this has to do with management of expectations. We had one 6th session, which was about consumption habits. You know, this was a very short session because it was not exactly the purpose of this study. We will be doing a very large study about consumption next week, in which we'll really try to understand what are the different product categories and different kind of attributes that consumers will start value the more after the pandemic crisis. So I started smiling because it's about consumption. I'm from consumer behavior, so I'm really excited about it. But in terms of consumption habits, what we see is that in terms of intentions, we ask them after the pandemic crisis, to what extent do you agree that you will consume products as you used to, or that you'll start consuming more products, or that you'll start consuming products that you were not consuming before. And we get kind of a moderate intentions of returning back to the same level of consumption that they were doing before, and we have very small, very low intentions of starting to consume more, or to start consuming different types of products. This is interesting because the next question was, oh, sorry, this is still about what we did here. I thought I was one slide further. What we did here, it was again, you know, taking to see if there were differences, and there are differences in terms of I will return to consume products as I used to. So mainly those without income difficulties, they are the ones expressing more this wish or this indication. And we also got a significant difference. Sorry, I forgot to put the circle over here. Also, we also got like a significant difference over here, in which you realize, you know, that those that have moderate difficulties are the ones that indicate that they will start consuming a little bit more products. No significant difference were found in the other one. What is interesting about what I was mentioning a while ago is that we ask participants then to indicate what kind of products would they consider buying after the pandemic crisis. So more like after the pandemic crisis, I think I will start consuming more something, you know, and we had a couple of categories. And what we observe here is that the categories that the participants indicate stronger preferences are the ones related with health, so more healthy products and more sustainable products. And this was a surprise, the sustainability. We were not expecting people to indicate this, but most likely also during these last few weeks that we have been at home, it gave us the opportunity to rethink a little bit about life and the kind of footprint that we want to leave in the world when we live. So I think it might be related with this reflection. And we also obtained stronger preferences to start buying products that we could share with others. Okay, and this makes sense again, because we are at home, we are just with our nuclear family, we are without the opportunity of seeing those that we love, our relatives, and so we are thinking about eventually starting buying more products that we can share, that we can consume together. So creating these social bonds that we are currently in need of. We analyzed these same intentions. We did it in terms of the economic difficulties. So again, you know, the same 3 segments that we have been analyzing in the last 33 slides. And basically, what we identified here was 3 areas in which there were significant differences, but these were also the areas where we had lower intentions. So apparently, the ones with moderate income, which I would classify more like middle class eventually, you know, are the ones that say that they will perhaps start focusing in a little bit more products that give them pleasure. We also observe some difference here in terms of luxury products, but this might be due mainly by the blue bar. We have all these analyses, but it was a little bit too much to include it over here. And again, this one, I believe it's also managed by the blue bar. So clearly, no, it makes sense. Those with lower income do not expect to start buying some luxury products. Okay, then we still had 3 more indicators that were very specific with the COVID pandemic crisis. And we had multiple ones, especially regarding working conditions. I will just briefly mention a couple of them. So because I'm running out of time, I'm checking my watch. So what we have here in terms of satisfaction with the measures, general measures that different institutions implemented. So we asked this about the government, health general management, health department, something, you know, town halls, police and related kind of entities, medical staff and nurses and other ones from the healthcare system, as also general services by the neighborhood entities. What we observe is that in general participants were happy, you know, above the 4, so they were happy, and the one that clearly obtained the highest level of satisfaction was to do with our healthcare personnel, the kind of effort that they are all making to keep us healthy. Some kind of analysis, you know, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we observe differences in terms of the income, depending on income. So what we observe is that those that suffer the lowest income, that have the highest difficulties in living with their income, are the ones also rating lower each of the bars. So these are the guys with the blue bars. You see that they are always slightly lower than the other ones. We did the same analysis again, but now we measure the efficacy. Okay, so how efficient do you think some of these measures are? And in terms of efficacy, what we find out is that, you know, again, we also observe these kind of changes with the blue bar, you know, always, you know, offering lower level of efficacy compared with the other ones. Then we had one section that was regarding the specific measures that were implemented. So those kind of bank measures from the government, giving money, layoff, allowing all these kind of things. And at the time that we did the survey, these were the measures that had been announced by the government and other entities, like, you know, being forced to stay at home, the special risks for elderly people, so that they really had the duty of staying at home, teleworking, closing of multiple services like schools, discos, theaters, closing of the churches, preventing people from going to the church in order to not meet large groups of people, general rule of not circulating on the street, retail, the closing of all the stores with the exception of keeping the ones of first need, like the groceries and supermarkets, and also all the other service in general. Look, what we observe here is that people agree. Okay, so people did not disagree with these specific measures. When we make this analysis between the different levels of income or different difficulties that people have living with their income, the only one that we get significant are these 2 ones. So those that, and these are mainly guided again by the ones that experience more difficulty, because probably many of them had to stop working and could not enter in teleworking, and so therefore they report this kind of feelings. But of course, these are just, you know, hypotheses. We didn't test specifically for these ones. Then we asked participants to what extent did they consider some of these measures to be efficient, And what we obtained here is that, overall, but at lower levels of agreement, but, overall, we agree with most of the measures. The ones that we agreed, that participants agreed the less, were related with the specific measures to support companies, especially probably small companies, and also the specific measures to protect employment, job positions. We had it over there. Then we did some kind of analysis, but this time with different levels of income. And again, we find significant differences across the majority of the items. Most of the times, again, guided by the blue bar, which are the ones that tend to evaluate these measures with lower level of efficacy than the other ones. Then we had one, and we are entering our last section. So for all those that are tired of listening to me, I'm almost ending. So we had this was a very big section because we divided our 1,000 participants in 3 big groups. The groups of those that were doing some kind of teleworking, partially or full-time, the group of people that were still working physically, that were going to work, and then the group of people that were not working. I had like 30 slides about this. I thought that for the good sake of the presentation and for our mental health, that I should only present a couple of them. We thought that the most interesting ones would be to focus on the teleworking, because these are the new ones. These are the ones that it's something new for our society. So just to give you an idea, in terms of the distribution of participants, in terms of working conditions, what we have here, I think I had a couple of, yes. So what we have here, we have about like 40.7 of participants. They started working from home, so they are in a teleworking kind of format, 34.2 in full-time, and the other ones partially. So we also observe that some people are, going to the company, working from home, going from the company. So some companies adopted this kind of shifts strategies. So this was the distribution that we had. In terms of teleworking, what we observed, we asked many different measures. What we observed here, and this was nice to observe, is that people think that they are being able to manage their work in a quite autonomous way, but we also observe other things, as people indicate they don't agree very much that they have been working less than usual, and people have been experiencing some pressure, that they are forced to be constantly online. And when asked if they are working more, we have like a kind of a general level of agreement that in principle, yes, they are working slightly more than they used to, because now we are almost 24 hours times 7 days a week available. So we almost look like supermarkets, because we can be open, like in US, we are open almost every time. Then we did this analysis, again, following some kind of methodology, trying to understand if different types of participants, different types of workers, or different types of citizens, depending on the difficulty that they have in terms of experience of living with their income, to what extent we would have a difference. And we just obtained a significant difference in 2 items. So those, and this is something that we should pay attention of, especially managers that have many of these employees working for them. The ones that have more difficulty are the ones that claim that they feel that they are really forced to be constantly online. This can be also very much related, for example, with call centers and so on. A lot of companies move this kind of work put people at home but answering phones. And also, again, the ones that have lower income, that have more difficulty in living with their income, are the ones that declare that they have worked more than usual. In terms of working conditions, we try to assess to what extent companies were providing support for this kind of teleworkers. And it's nice to observe, it's good to observe that, generally speaking, apparently companies are making an effort. So companies are putting effort for that employees have the equipment and the conditions to make their work. They are helping them somehow, probably through, I've been talking with a bunch of people in teleworking, with the weekly meetings, and trying to understand how the employees are doing, also to what extent they are managing less or worse their physical and health and mental well-being. But what we observe here is that in general, this is on a scale 1 to 7, so it's quite high. you know, the mean is 6.13. So it means that we had a lot of 7s most likely. Feel that they have conditions to work from home remotely. So they have computer, they have phone, they have internet connections, and they can do their job. They can do job from home. Another interesting insight, of course, we need to be careful with doing this kind of analysis because this is an online research panel. This means that those that answered this survey, they already have access on a regular basis to a computer because they fill in the studies. Well, they may also fill in a smartphone or something, but in principle, they are, you know, they are close, they have access to technology in general. But, you know, in this sample, majority of people, not many people, sorry, it's not many people. In general, they indicated that, not many of them indicated that they need to share the computer with someone. So that in principle, they have their own technology to work with, sorry. In terms of work conditions, again, dividing by the 3 segments, what we observe is that the only items where we get statistical differences, significant ones, it's when we ask about that specific item, that at my place people have been sharing more than one computer. Sorry, more than one people have been sharing one computer. Not a surprise that the blue bar is higher, so people with more difficulty in living with their income are the ones that need to share more the computers. And also regarding the platforms and so on, you know, we get the highest bar for those that live without difficulty, and of course we could try to provide a lot of interpretation for these items. In terms of teleworking, but this time in terms of age, what we observe is that a significant decrease, we just got decrease in 3 of these items. We observe a significant decrease in terms of sharing a computer. Interesting, those that are older, but most likely because also they don't need to share the computer with someone, are the ones giving the lowest bar. Then we also have it here on the right side. I think you can see my mouse, you know, here in terms of the platforms, you know, in general, the oldest ones are the ones having experiencing the biggest difficulty. We did this also for people that were working physically, but here we tried to assess to what extent people were able to keep balance with their family life and their working life. And it was a smaller sample because here we could only use those that reported being in teleworking and with kids. So we ended up here with a sample of 139. And in terms of the level of support, you know, majority of people indicated they need to provide some kind of support. Interestingly, we can see it on the left side, is that when we ask them, are your kids at home while you work, you know, 65% of them say no. So this seems to indicate that people are still using the family support networks in order to allow them to work. But this also indicates a very risky situation because it might indicate that many of the people that are in teleworking feel the need to leave the kids with their parents or with the grandparents, which, as you know, at this moment in time, it can be a very risky decision because kids, although they can be asymptomatic, they can also transport the virus with them. So we have there and we have there. In terms of family balance, and I'm almost ending. In terms of family balance, what we found out is that not the majority of people, but again, it's a scale 1 to 7. We are obtaining values between 4.5 and 6 and 5, so we need to be careful with this kind of interpretation. But at least we don't get indicators that people are having a huge difficulty in managing their family life and their personal life. So I don't want to be super excited about this or optimistic, but I don't think we also have reasons to feel very pessimistic about this. Because we also had a group of people that are working physically that I did not present here for the sake of time. Now, this allowed us also to analyze, and I have an error that was lost in there, to analyze what was going on between those that are in teleworking and those that are working presentially. And apparently what we observe here is that those that are in teleworking, they are under much more pressure. So they feel that they are not able to answer to all the things that they are asked to. They feel that they need to work more hours after time and weekends, you know, to be able to compensate. But of course, you know, we need to make lunch and we need to do laundry and all these kind of things. So it's normal that people in teleworking have this kind of difficulties. This was my last slide with graphics. I'm not sure if Diogo wants to give me more 5 minutes just to do a highlight of the main conclusions or no. No, I don't need it because I can easily stop here. You know, we'll have all this, the entire report available online in our page from the Observatory of the Portuguese Society. So my greatest thanks for listening to me all this amount of time. And